Hello and welcome back to Life on the Wrist. Hope you all are doing well today. Today we're going to be looking at another vintage piece that we had the pleasure of getting in. Today we're looking at a really beautiful Omega Geneve reference 1660.002. It's a really beautiful gold-plated piece from the 1960s with a really cool complication when it comes to changing the date complication on this piece. I think this piece speaks to the quality and what Omega can produce or what they have produced in their history and what they continue to produce today. So really excited to jump into this piece with you. So without further ado, let's get into it. This is probably not the first time Omega has received incredible praise for their history of making exceptional watches since their founding in 1848. Omega produced watches that attracted buyers because of their technical ability as well as their abilities in design. Sometimes it can feel overwhelming to look at the history of a brand like Omega and keep track of all the lines of watches that they released. From the Speedmaster to the Railmaster, it can be a challenge, but also extremely exciting to research and learn about, given the depth of watches that were made throughout their history. The Geneve line of watches is an important piece of their history and led into some incredibly important pieces from the brand. The history of the Geneve line of watches dates back to the 1950s. The line was introduced sometime in 1952. Whoops, sorry about the focus there, chat, everyone. Sometime in 1952 or 1953. At the time, the watches were basically the best hand-wound watches Omega produced in volume during this era. There were some chronometer pieces they made, but obviously they were not mass-producing them. They were originally smaller in size, 30 millimeters in diameter, and interestingly, the name of those models were the name of the Geneve line comes from referencing the Geneva Observatory Trials that their models partook in and successfully won many awards at. Omega produced many different versions of the Geneve watches, but sometimes collectors have said that they're kind of less interesting compared to the Seamasters and the Constellation line of watches, which had many different dial variations, many different case designs, and lug designs. But nevertheless, there are plenty of Geneves that can make exploring and collecting them really interesting. Geneve watches were produced throughout this time period into the 1960s when this particular version of the Geneve, or this particular version of one of the Geneves that Omega produced was manufactured. This watch was manufactured in 1967. The watch has a gold-filled case that is in overall fairly good condition. The case has some oxidation on the right side, so if you look here, you can kind of see a little bit of oxidation on the dial on the right side of the case. If you see that little red hue there. Which, for me, I'm a huge fan of oxidation on cases. If you follow us on Instagram, you know that I post a lot of the pieces that are going at auction that have that kind of interesting look. The gold case ends up with sort of that reddish tone to which to me looks attractive on gold cases. There are some signs of wear and polishing on the case, but the watch remains in overall very attractive condition. The lugs are fairly short if you look at the watch straight on like that. And angled towards the wrist, you can see these are a little bit more pronounced towards the wrist, but are not, not completely flat. The watch, as you probably saw, has an unsigned crown. Sorry about the focus, everyone. It has an unsigned crown, as you can see, so it's likely replaced from the original, as the watches of this era had a signed Omega crown. Looking at the dial, the white sunburst dial I think is very, very attractive. You'll probably see that there are some moisture freckles, as some people call them, on the dial that give the watch a pretty nice look. Additionally, it has applied hour markers, Omega logo, and a date window at 3 o'clock with that gold outline. Looking at the sword hands and the sword hour and minutes hands, one can see black luminescent material that's applied to them. What's really interesting is if you look at the luminescent material that's closest to the center of the dial, it has fallen out on both hands, but the luminescent material is still on the ends of it. You can see very clearly on that hour marker. You can see that it still is present on the ends of the hands. This is, probably unattractive to some collectors, but others may feel that it makes the ends of the hands more distinct and make reading the time a little bit easier. If you look at the back of the watch, you'll see a stainless steel case back that has the Speedmaster logo on it. Of course, the first thing that probably comes to mind is, why would a Geneve watch have a Speedmaster case back? Well, there's documented history of some Geneve watches that came with these case backs, and so it isn't uncommon, especially in the 1960s. If you remove the case back, and again, there will be pictures of this on lifeonthewrist.com on our article, you can examine the inside of the case back, and more information can be found about the watch. First, you have some text that describes the fact that the watch has a base metal of stainless steel that's coated with 40 microns of gold. Underneath that text is the Omega stamp, followed by Fab Suisse, Swiss made. Then the reference number 166.002 is stamped. And then below that reference number, there are two shields that are stamped. The first shield has the letters SGR on the inside of it. This is referencing the case maker that Omega contracted with to produce some of their cases, and from what I know, they're the third largest case manufacturer of Omega during this era. It was a very common practice during this time to sort of outsource the manufacturing of some of the cases of watches. Even though some watch collectors today want to focus on collecting in-house produced watches, it was very, very common practice for brands to do. Next to the SGR stamp is a shield with a shovel. It's not perfectly known what the symbol means, but there are two theories circulating the collector community about this particular stamp. The first is that it is a stamp of a case manufacturer, and the second is that it might reference the gold content in gold-filled watches, as this stamp is only seen on gold-filled watches. Because we have the SGR stamp right next to the shovel, it makes me think that this is related to the gold content of this watch, but again, I haven't been able to find any documented research to point me in either direction. The watch runs on the Omega caliber 565 movement. The caliber is a 12.5 line automatic movement with a 50-hour power reserve. It was first introduced in 1966, so 1 year before this watch was manufactured, and produced until 1969. About 5.8 million units were delivered during this 3 years of this movement, and so they are found a lot in Omega pieces. The caliber has a sweeping center seconds hand, Inca block shock protection, and a really cool quick set date. The way that one changes the date is actually by pulling the crown in and out. So I'll show you here. So you can see that we are on 1, but if I pull the crown out all the way, it goes to 2. You can put the crown back in. If you pull the crown out again, you can see it elapsed to 3. So a fairly cool way of quick setting a date. Additionally, one can get into when you look at the 565 caliber and a lot of other Omega movements, you often are looking at this really cool copper coating that has been applied to the movements, and it's a really attractive and a joy to look at for Omega movements of this era. One last marking that is on the movement of this watch is on the Omega logo that's above the caliber number, there is a number 1 on the inside of that logo. What's really cool is Omega actually marked their movements to describe the angle of the dials. 1 to indicate flat dials, 2 to indicate dome dials, and 3 to indicate high dome dials. This is really important because the post that the hands sit on, or the hands are mounted on, may need to, I guess the hands would need to vary in length depending on the dial height. And so it's just another way that Omega wanted to make it easy to maintain and service their watches. On the wrists, watch, as all Omegas seem to do, if I can get this to focus here, super attractive, very, very nice to look at, 34 millimeters in diameter, and lugs make it sit really nicely on the wrist. I think Omegas are so great, and really a pleasure to wear on the wrist. It's just so comfortable and really attractive to look at. So when wearing this Geneve and Geneve watches in general, one can really feel the quality of the manufacturing, but also the elegance of design Omega put together for this line of watches. The watch is easy to wear, easy to read, and in my opinion punches way above what many consider to be everyday watches of today's era. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at this really incredible Omega Geneve Automatic Reference 166.002. As I mentioned, we have an article on lifeonthewrist.com that I encourage you to take a look at, because we did discuss things like the movement as well as the inside case back of this watch. So if you want to see pictures of those while we sort of discuss it on our video, I highly encourage you to check out the article. I think this is an exceptional piece, a great example of the 1960s and what Omega was producing during this era, and overall just an absolutely incredible piece to be able to have on your wrist. It's simple, it does have the complication of the date, which I think does come in handy today. And as I mentioned sort of just now, I do think that if you're looking for an everyday watch, this is a perfect example, given its simplicity in design as well as the incredible movement quality that you'll get from a piece like this. If you are new to Life on the Wrist, be sure to subscribe to the channel and share this video with a friend. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about this piece. My question for the day is, do you have an Omega Geneve and do you enjoy wearing it? I think it's always great to kind of get validation from other people if you are looking at Omega Geneves to add to your collection. So let me know in the comment section below if you have one of these and if you enjoy wearing it. As always, there will be an article on lifeonthewrist.com, which I've mentioned, so you can read about this watch a little bit more and see some more pictures of the piece. If you wouldn't mind liking this video, it really does help me out. With that said, guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and until next time.